So I guess going along with Phoenix, let's talk about dependencies for a little bit and just packages in the general ecosystem. How do you feel about Elixir dependencies?
Well, you're in luck. So the package manager and the package registry for Elixir is called Hex. I'm one of the 3 maintainers of Hex. I primarily work on the CLI, but I've worked in all the areas of it in the past. And so I do have some strong opinions on it. I could go on all day. So I think we've put in a lot of focus into the ergonomics of package management. The first thing I think people ask is, hey, in Rails, there's a library that does this, or in React, there's a library that does this. How come there's not one in Hex that does the same thing? And it's very intentional. So when I was first getting started, I wrote an API wrapper for meetup.com. And I was talking to Andrea from the Elixir core team and showed him what it was. And he was just sort of like not very enamored at all. And here I thought like, hey, this ecosystem doesn't have enough packages. People are looking for these things in the Rails ecosystem. And they come over and we don't have them, so I'm helping to fill in the gaps. And come to find out, it's like a very philosophically different ecosystem. And in the Elixir world, it's just not really asked for to write wrapper code, like just write it yourself. And so a lot of the tools, a lot of libraries you get are sort of the lowest level implementation. And then the idea is that and I think this goes along with the fact that the Elixir programmers are generally pretty experienced, are like, hey, why would you want me to design an API for you to use to do this thing and then have to work with whatever API design I came up with? You're smart enough. Like, here are the basic tools to, let's say, write an API wrapper. Like, here's the JSON encoding and decoding library, and here's the HTTP library that you need, or whatever else that little bits and pieces that you might need that are sort of like the first order components of it. And then you build the API, design it the way you want to use it. And so that was an important lesson for me, that we don't have as many packages as NPM or as many as Ruby gems, but in a lot of ways it's completely intentional that we don't have that. And so keep that in mind if you're just looking at pure numbers and using that as a way to judge like how mature the community is. That's just like not a measurement. I think that in the Elixir and Erlang world, that's just like not a measurement that we value strongly.
There is, not to mention too, API wrapper packages like that are a pain to maintain long term. Yeah, open source in general, it can, it can get crufty in age over time. So especially having to keep in the loop to make those API updates.
Yeah, like if you're a company and you write it because you're using that service, you open source it, it's fine. But then a couple years goes by and you switch to a different vendor and you're not using that API anymore, there's no reason to think you keep updating it. So it becomes a little bit stale. And the other thing on the registry is if you look at the dependency graph of an Elixir app versus a Node app, for instance, this is easy pickings here. From a maintainability and security standpoint, the Hex resolver is very different than other package management resolvers out there. And so the benefit is you're going to end up with a lot less library code overall. And so, which is good. Like you said, more code is more code to maintain. And also just from a security standpoint, if you look at the attack vectors on a Node app, I mean, it's just impossible to plug those up, right? You've got 600 plus libraries in your average Node app, and most of your developers would tell you they don't really know what any of the code in any of those 600 libraries looks like, much less audit it for security. You just sort of hope for the best.
Yeah. Not to mention it's multiple gig of dependencies in the first place.
Just pulling it around, building images, passing images around and stuff.
I don't know. Here at CodeEd, we've got certain employees that have very, very strong opinions about node dependencies. So yeah,
they like them or they don't like them.
They do not like them.
Oh,
yeah, it's definitely burned us in the past.
It can get a little sticky in there. That's for sure. Yeah, and that's maybe some level of maturity or some level of like you've seen enough stuff break that you're cynical at some point in your career, that you look at all of that code that you're unfamiliar with and you think, man, a million things could go wrong with that, and that's going to end up on my Ops Genie alert some Saturday, and I'm going to have to figure it out.
And of course, it'll be at like 4 a.m.
It doesn't matter what time it is, man. If Ops Genie's barking, that's a bad sign for me. It's like the only time my phone makes a sound is then.
So I do want to talk about, though, a little bit. So for the packages that do exist in the Elixir ecosystem, I've always generally found that they tend to be extremely high quality and really leverage a lot of the OTP principles. Do you perhaps want to, I guess, shed some insight on that? What is your favorite package?
It's hard to pick one favorite, but Oban Pro, I don't know if you guys use Oban for kind of background processing. And I've seen Parker like talk about it and kind of dissect some of the components of it. And it's just a really, really well-built piece of software. Does a lot of cool things and does them very well. But it's probably the library with the code that's maybe the cleverest of code that I know of.
Yeah, I feel like I need to dig through source because I've not actually peered into it.
It's probably easier to just run into him one day and just ask him about it so he can explain it to you, because it's not, some of the decisions are not obvious at all. But yeah, it's a pretty amazing little piece of software. So, and I think like the ones that are the most popular are some of the most simple ones, like JSON. Michal Moschala's like JSON encoding and decoding library. I don't think that there's like a ton of code to it. It's just really, really well written, really efficient and fast.